Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ruby, this is Ruby Red, and in this video I'm going to be reading the shortlist for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction and giving you my prediction for who's going to win. This is the second year that the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction is being awarded, and the award's open to writers from the United States and Canada, or not writers, but books published in. And it's open to not only novels, but also short story collections and graphic novels written by women and non-binary authors. I think based on a little bit of what I read on the Carol Shields website that this prize came to be because of some criticisms of the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is based out of the UK, being too white. And I do think the Women's Prize heard that criticism because the last 2 years, I guess, have been a bit less white, so that's good. But yeah, I'm really excited to be reading for this prize. Initially, I had wanted to read as much as I could from the long list before the short list was announced, and that could be its own video, and then I would have a second video that was just finishing the short list, but that did not happen. It's just the one video. So I think in some of the clips I mention a long list versus a short list video. That's what I'm talking about. Sorry, you're not getting that. And without further ado, I suppose let's dive in. Hello, here I am, because I finished Vernon Wood. I have it here as like some sort of proof, even though this isn't actually proof, this is just a book. And I'm not gonna hold it up the whole time I talk, but here's the book and here's me who finished it. I loved this book. I'm so glad I read it. I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, I wanna read that. And then something about the cover was making me think it was like more of like a cozy mystery kind of thing. And I was like, never mind. But then I heard it being called eco-fiction and I was like, what? I'm so glad I finally read it. And I totally think it deserves its spot on this list. Eleanor Catton has written a Booker Award-winning book and a screenplay that is for my favorite movie. So of course, this novel is also excellent, but it really is excellent. So this book is about guerrilla gardeners. Vernon Wood is an organization where they like farm in unused tracts of land, like the sides of highways and like abandoned lots, sometimes legally, sometimes not legally. And they've never really like broke even. They've never been able to like expand operations and like make it as a nonprofit. And it's like they're kind of falling apart, I think. And then they encounter an American billionaire. This all takes place in New Zealand. They encounter this American billionaire. He's going to give them tons of cash and a space to really like farm. And so that it causes some tensions in the group, because most of them have a philosophy that is pretty anti-billionaire. But it's like, it's sort of a make it or break it situation. It's just a bird. And so the story is told through the perspectives of two of the like founding members of Vernon Wood and the billionaire Robert. And also there's another guy, Tony, who's like kind of involved with Vernon Wood and like kind of not. But all of the characters are just so, well, not Shelley as much, but like mostly they're just so full of themselves. It's so like egotistical, and they're also like manipulative. They all think they know so much better than everyone around them. Robert is like a total psychopath. It's just like everyone is plotting something, everyone is performing something, and there are several times when Tony specifically is always ranting about something, and that's extremely entertaining because he just is like ah! You just want to strangle him a little bit. So the story is like them like kind of trying to work together, but there is something else afoot in the region, and everybody sort of gets like caught up in this other situation. I won't say more than that. But I want to recommend this to a very specific group of people, not exclusively, but I do think if you're somebody who loved The Secret History and has never been able to scratch that itch, as they say, you should try this book because it might do it for you, because it really did it for me. This is not dark academia, which is the subgenre that The Secret History often falls under. Not often, like always, but I've never found other dark academia books to really be what The Secret History is. And I now understand that that's because what is so good about The Secret History to me is not the dark aspects or the academia aspects. It's just that part of academia is the perfect place for the most obnoxious, egotistical, like self-obsessed characters to gather and interact. And that's what made that book so juicy. And another place for all those characters to interact is with a grassroots anti-capitalist guerrilla gardening nonprofit. You know what I mean? The writing was phenomenal. The story was engaging. It was like, there were times that the prose maybe, not the prose never dragged. The story would drag because we were like caught up in the prose, which I'm not mad about. I thoroughly enjoyed pretty much every single second of reading this. I don't even know what else to say. I loved it so much. There was some really fun Shakespearean foreshadowing in this. There was, of course, like the discussions surrounding environmental degradation, billionaires, technology, food scarcity, food sovereignty. Like, it was really good. And it was like, if The Secret History was eco-fiction, I definitely didn't realize how much I was going to love this book. I had no idea that this was going to be like this. And I really liked it. So can't wait to read more from this long list. The next thing that I read was Coleman Hill by Coleman Foot. And this is a piece of work that falls under what Audre Lorde has coined this term, biomythology. And the author took inspiration and both like documents, like photos and like research about her family's history, as well as the oral history of her family that she learned from various family members. And she puts that all together into this book, and it catalogs like the journey, the struggles of two families that she is related to that both left Georgia in 1915 or something, and moved to New Jersey, and what happened to them from there, and the kind of complexities of like coming to the promised land to escape Jim Crow South, and how like in some ways some things were better and some things were worse, and the cycles of trauma that are described in that book were a lot to read. There's very little joy at all in the whole book. And then also within the story, like every chapter moves forward in time and is told from kind of a different perspective, and you don't know whose perspective it is. You have to just like pick up on clues, and there is a family tree at the beginning of the book that can help you sort that out, but just based on who that character is talking about and what they're calling other members of the family, you can just like figure out who they are. But the other thing that I really liked in that story was that you see the behavior of some characters from multiple perspectives. So the way that maybe one of the characters acts towards her children, like you already know how she was treated when she was growing up, and you saw how her mother treated her, and now how she's treating her own daughter, and just getting to see that progression. Like, it doesn't make any of the abuse okay, or like it's awful, but it was very interesting to be able to so clearly trace the patterns and understand like where some of these characters are coming from. Like, everybody is suffering so much in this book, and I thought it was like a very well put together compilation of, you know, fact and fiction, and sort of trying to understand where you came from, and maybe like what patterns and histories like you're trying to stop. Healing generational trauma, etc., as like a buzzword. But yeah, I thought it was hard to read, but I think it was very well written. And I didn't love this one as much, but I do totally see why it has a place here as being like a fantastic work of fiction, just because of how much like of the author is in the book. Like, I just feel like the act of writing that book would have been just so hard and so painful, because the act of reading it was hard and it was painful. So I'm appreciative of that, even though I didn't necessarily like love the book. It's one of those things where it's like hard to rate something, like assign a number of stars to something that is so personal. In some ways, to me, it's even more personal than like some memoir that I've read, because it's not just about Kim, it's about her family's history and her family's interpretation of their own history. Like, it's just like, it's so deeply personal. I don't know. Hi, so I'm here to talk about another book because I've got the other 3 that I need to read for this project, and I am choosing not to finish Daughter. I honestly only read about 50 pages of this. It's not a very long book, but I still am just deciding I'm not gonna force my way through it. I've been doing really good this year with my goal of not reading books that I'm not enjoying, and I really wasn't enjoying it. The premise is, it's about a woman, Mona. She's a writer. Her dad wrote a very famous novel that's been like adapted, etc. And he's like an egomaniac, and they have a messed up relationship, kind of. And then they come together over a shared secret. He confides in her that he's having an affair. And so, but that connection, like, that brings them together. So now she's like feasting on this attention from her dad and this like shared thing that they have. And then he decides he has to tell his wife about the affair, and he tells his wife that he told Mona about it. So now she is like, not only she lost this connection she was having with her father that was like fueling her, but also she's estranged from like the rest of the family and something about her fiance. But so the concept, like, that could definitely be an interesting story. However, the writing was very, I don't know, it's very stream of consciousness, not a lot of like breaks. Some parts it's like a really, really long paragraph, and then there will be like just like a few lines separated, which again isn't something I actually dislike, but it just, like, the story almost felt like I was like, is this like kind of meta? Is this about Claudia? Like, I don't know, something, it just was, I wasn't enjoying it, okay? I just wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like reading it in this style. I have been dreading having to pick it back up for days. So that's a red flag to me that I should not read the book. So I really hope that this doesn't win, because that would be awkward. It also feels kind of like a right book, wrong time. Like, if I was in like a different reading headspace, I might enjoy it, but coming out of some books that like I really liked, some really intense books, and then also having already started A History of Burning, which I'm really enjoying, Daughter was just like not having the same emotional draw or impact for me. So yeah, but I do still have 2 books to finish. I'm almost finished with A History of Burning, but I'll talk about it just once I'm done. I just wanted to update you about Daughter because I'm about to return it to the library. Okay, you guys maybe don't like want or need to know the trials that I've just been through trying to find a place to film out here. The sun was making me feel like so red and flushed of face, and I broke my tripod immediately before this. And I do have a different tripod. It's just small, like I can't raise it up very high, so I have to like put this little tripod like on something. I was dragging logs all over my yard, and then I found a place that I was like, oh, this is good. But then it's like this with the bugs. The bugs are really out today, but this is a lot better. And I'm in the shade, and it's all fine. And I'm here to talk about A History of Burning because I finished this book, and wow, did I love it. This book is a family. It follows a family, generation by generation. So we start out with Pirbai in India, and he's young, like a teenage boy looking for work, and he gets like conned basically into getting on a boat and traveling to the coast of Africa in Kenya. And he is put to work building the railroad there that's going to run from the coast in Kenya up to Lake Victoria in Uganda. The British have brought over a whole bunch of Indian men, boys, mostly, and also men, to work for like some money, but almost no money. The Indians are working alongside Africans, and they have this language barrier, and the British are really trying to keep them separate, as is their way to keep everybody subjugated. Anyway, so it starts with him and the things he experiences, and then it follows his family and his descendants and the horrors that they experience. Because this book does cover quite a lot of horrors. So the writing, I thought was phenomenal, and the the themes in this of like belonging, and it's mostly about Indian communities in African countries and how like they have to fight for their right to be there, and they're like, we didn't like even want to be here in the first place. Just the topics covered, like there was some things that I had no idea about. I didn't know what happened in Kenya and Uganda after the British were overthrown and like pulled back, and the power regimes that followed the British rule, and what that like shift in power meant for the Indian communities there. I didn't know how many Indians had um, immigrated purposefully or by force. I guess it's not immigrating if it's by force. I didn't know. I didn't know about any of that. So, first of all, learned a lot about history in a part of the world that I don't know enough history about, and also the story, like the characters, the cycles of not just like trauma, but survival, and like holding on to whatever you can hold on to, and letting go what you need to let go of, like to constantly be moving, migrating as a refugee. Like there's just so much that these characters choose to leave behind and also like are forced to leave behind. It was just like heartbreaking over and over again, and how much like they just start again. It's like, and it becomes this like family motto of like, we just start over, like okay, like disaster struck and we build it again. It's just like, wow, it was really good. um and there also is a lot of characters, especially as we move forward in time. So the book starts in the 1890s and it finishes in the 1990s, so it spans 100 years. And as we move into the later part of the 19th century, the 20th century, sorry, why are those like that, um the descendants of our original character like start to have this desire for independence and like freedom. And whereas like previously there was a like you had to stay at home, stay with your family, support your family. It was very much like, we're a unit and I sacrifice in order to like preserve and save like the unit. It's not about me, it's about like how I can protect my family. And then as we are moving forward, it becomes more about like, I want to be free of my family, not in those words, but I want to have something else. Like I want to have more, I want to do more. I'm like looking at the world and I want to find my own place in it, not just like the place that my family has for me. And how those ideologies like clash, and also how they connect. I don't know. I really liked this book. I thought it was powerful, heartbreaking, really, really good. And I think I'm also seeing a trend. There are similarities between this book and books like another book on this shortlist, Coleman Hill, where we are following a family through generations of hardship, and we're seeing how, the actions of one ancestor can affect multiple levels of descendants and how things are inherited. And also books like Homegoing by Yajasi, which is a phenomenal book. That book follows one character who becomes enslaved and how that drastically impacts her descendants versus the descendants of her sister who are not enslaved. Um, And in that way, these sweeping family, stories, Pachinko is another one where we follow multiple generations through history. And it's not just about the family and like what you learn about, or what you can, yeah, what you learn about generational inheritance, but also it gives you such an interesting historical perspective. So I really liked that, and I loved this book. And I highly recommend it. A History of Burning by Jenica Oza. So, so good. And that means I have just one more book to finish for this shortlist. And then I guess I'm going to predict the winner. We'll see what happens. I did it. I finished Brotherless Night. So I read, or at least attempted to read, all 5 books from the shortlist before the prize has been announced. And well, okay, Brotherless Night was phenomenal. It was so good. This book is about a girl named Sashi. She's about 19 when the book starts. She lives in the northernmost part of Sri Lanka in Jaffna with her parents, her 4 brothers, and she wants to be a doctor. And as we're just stepping into the story, a civil war starts brewing. It doesn't really start overnight, but it starts, and it changes her life trajectory in becoming a doctor, and it impacts literally everyone. So it's a story about civil war and how her family gets involved in the movement. They are Tamil, which is the ethnic minority of Sri Lanka, and they are being oppressed and mistreated and discriminated, and they want that to stop. So it's also about the complications inherent in political upheaval and power struggles, and how all of that fighting, like, it doesn't just happen to the people in the movement, the people who are active. It's happening to everybody. It's happening to everybody who lives there. All the civilians, like, lives are being impacted by the war that's being fought with them just in the middle of it, and how hard that is, and how it just hurts so much. This book was heartbreaking because it's sort of about the way that a revolution is not ever going to be a net 100% good, right? It's like there's no way to peacefully overthrow the government. Anyway, the way that it's told is sort of as though Sashi is telling the story to you. I don't know what the name of that style is called, but in the beginning, the first line of this book is, "I wrote a letter to a terrorist I used to know," and that takes place in 2009, and then we go back to 1980 something, and that's when the story really begins. So this whole time I'm reading the book and I'm wanting to figure out, I'm like, okay, who of this cast of characters is the terrorist you used to know? And she, as she is working her way through medical school, she does become involved, because her whole goal of becoming a doctor was to help people, to heal people, and somebody invites her to become a field medic at the field hospital for one of the primary Tamil militant group, which is the Tigers. And she does, because she knows that she's going to be able to help people, not just people who are fighting, but also civilians who are being caught in the middle. And that brings her a lot closer to the powers of militant groups than she maybe would have wanted to be, or that she would have become involved on her own. So there's just a lot of trying to find a path that is the least bad, I guess, because you want the freedoms, of course, that the Tigers are promising, but she sees firsthand the damage that some of their tactics do, and like, how can you support that? But also there's other military powers at play that are doing equally bad, occasionally worse things, and like, it's a war, so it's really bad. And so many people who are caught up in it really didn't have a choice. There's also kind of a focus on the women's role and perspective in all of this fighting and violence. There is a really powerful like women's march in this book that almost brought me to tears, frankly. And there's several other women in the book that Sashi is friends with or works alongside that just bring so much to the story. And and hearing each of their own ways that they feel like they are or aren't, committed to the struggle. And it was a phenomenal book. It was really sad, really hard to read at times because it's just feels quite honest, and you can feel the like sorrow and pain of the narrator and in all the writing. I thought it was so excellent. And it's also something that I knew next to nothing about. I knew that there had been a civil war in Sri Lanka, but I did not know any of the details about it, and I didn't know how long it went on for, and I didn't really even know the different groups that were fighting. So that's something I love about books. And this one was I can't possibly do justice to how much I love this book because I want to talk about it so much, but all in spoilers, and I don't want to spoil a lot of things for anybody because it's so good. So that's Brotherless Night. And now I guess I'd like to speak a little on my ranking. Because I want to give you my thoughts on the best book of the 5 in the shortlist, and then we can react to the actual winner a little bit later, whenever that is posted. I loved so deeply Vernon Wood, but I do not think it's going to win. I thought it was phenomenal, but I think we just have some far more like emotional heavy hitters in this lineup. So Vernon Wood, she's not in. Daughter, I really hope doesn't win because it would be a little bit awkward for me. I do, feel some regret that I didn't read that book, but I just didn't want to. So I hope it doesn't win because I'll feel quite bad about that. And because it seemed like, sure, it was gonna do some interesting, like maybe narrative things, but I think that the stories from all 3 of the other books were important, impactful, powerful, like so good. And also all written in such a unique and also different way. So Daughter, she's out. Now we're left with Coleman Hill, Brotherless Night, and A History of Burning. For me, Coleman Hill was my least favorite of these 3. And it partly had to do with the experience of reading it due to the narrative style. So that one, I'm going to say, is also out of the winning spot for me. So is my favorite Brotherless Night, which I just finished, and so do probably have some recency bias towards, or A History of Burning. Both of them tackle Civil War. And I guess Brotherless Night, there's just so much to sink your teeth into, and you really get to see the full scope of her life in this moment in history. Whereas in History of Burning, I love a generational story where we follow multiple generations and we learn a little bit about, each of them and their moment in history and what really impacted them and how that passed down to their descendants. At the end of the day, I absolutely loved both of those books. I think tonally, thematically, they're quite similar. And although they take place in different parts of the world with different classes of people with a different role in their current events, for sure, both of them left me with the same kinds of feelings. And I thought both of them were written so well, and I'm gonna say Brotherless Night, but I strongly suspect it's possible that if I had read them in the reverse order, I would pick History of Burning. Because I loved that book. But I loved Brotherless Night. This is really hard, and good heckin' luck to the judges on this one. Okay, friends, I fear that the time is upon us. First of all, let me just say, Carol Shields Prize, can you guys get it together? amount of difficulty that I had trying to find out like when they were announcing the winner, where it would be announced, are they live streaming it? Like I couldn't find anything. On their website, it just says the date. It doesn't say a time. I was keeping tabs on all their social medias. Finally, today, like this morning, they posted saying, watch this space or your inbox starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So at 8:15 p.m. Eastern time, I saw that they posted something else on Instagram, and I have not gotten an email, but I'm gonna open it. I wanted us to be here together. Carol Shields. Oh my God. It's Brotherless Night. Wow. I'm so glad we did this. B.V. Ganeshanathan has been named the winner of the 2024 Carol Shields Prize for Fiction for her novel, Brotherless Night. Yes. Wow. So I was right. I said that that was the one that I would pick, and I was right. So that feels great. And I think it absolutely deserved when she deserves this prize. Like, I'm so happy. So what a journey this has been on. 4 excellent books, really. And I'm sure that Daughter also is excellent under certain circumstances. But I'm so happy. I'm happy to be right, but I'm also just happy, you know? These are great books. And I'm definitely going to read this shortlist again next year because I liked it. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure of reading the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction shortlisted books. Maybe next year I'll be able to read more from the long list, but this was great. So I'll see you back here sometime soon for another video. Okay, bye.